All right, this is Rewired. I'm Jeff Cook.
I'm Katie Whitlock.
Okay, we're wrapping this sucker up.
Finally. Just kidding.
Ending with the sevens and nines. Gonna talk quite a bit about being in your head, processing with your head and what that means. What's interesting is that sometimes people see both sevens and nines as much more attached to their body than their heads. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of wisdom here about how much is going on within.
Yeah, I think that probably happens because people, when they think about thinking processing, they think that means that you're like an introvert because it happens in your head, and just our cultural like understanding of that means a person who's like quiet and silent and processing things in their head and not speaking out loud, which certainly applies to fives in some cases. And so 7 and 9, especially 7, people see the outward energy of sevens and they don't understand how that person can be living in their brain. Yep. So what that means is that we need to redefine what it means to be a thinking processor, right? It does not just mean that you're introverted and you think a lot.
This has been the most helpful thing for me in my relationships with sevens, because I always assume that they're quite active. And so when they fail to execute on things that we dreamed up together, it often is creates real problems for me in those relationships. And being able to see some of the language here about how much is going on in the head gives empathy, really sets my expectations, and just found it quite helpful. So
yeah.
Rock music. We're going to jump back into Joey Shuey's book, When Working Together Doesn't Work. May not have mentioned this on the podcast, but this was like available on Kindle for nothing. Yeah. She was giving this away for like $4.
Yeah.
So just in case you would like to take a look, I mean, it's a flyer. If you can browse the entire thing for very little money. So it is out there. But I'm going to pick up on 149. This is a quote that both of us liked. I'm going to do a fuller quote. When a thinking dominant 7 reframes, they're not reframing emotion. They're reframing their cognitive reception of what is happening. It's generally understood in personal and working relationships with 7s that the problem, more often than not, is getting the 7 to realize and acknowledge that there is a problem. Because 7s reframe the situation to align with their positive view, they rarely see the problem as problematic. Of all things, this isn't just going to apply to 7s. This may have some 9 overlap as well, and there's a reason. But what do you see in this quote?
I see. So when I was first taught about reframing for 7s, the thing that people said was like they're literally changing their view of reality. So it's not that 7s, I'm sure it's a little more complicated like that than this, but to make it a little too simple, it's not that 7s like know something bad happened and just like aren't letting on. Like they literally are only remembering it in a better light than what actually happened. Like it's for them. It's not for you. They're not giving you a different version of events because they don't think you can handle the full event. They only took in what they wanted to take in and reframed it in a certain way. So when she says they're not reframing emotion, they're reframing their cognitive reception of what's happening. They're not reframing how they felt about the thing. They're literally changing like what they think it meant and like what happened. I'll actually say I think they're rechanging what it meant. I think cognitive reception is because they're not crazy. Like you can't reframe reality. Like 7s aren't crazy people, but you can reframe what you think it meant and what you think we should take from it. Like when people talk about 7s reframing reality versus just feeling differently about a situation, that's what I think of.
I would be real curious to ask a 7 about this. We can think about 5s as the disembodied head living in their headspace. I would be curious if 7s don't have a little of that. And if you pair this with avoiding the negative spectrum of emotion, that's where my mind goes. It's like you might live in your head just a little bit more than others. But in that space, things are malleable, especially if you're avoiding negative emotions, is what I kind of take here. There is, for me, the 2-7-9 triad is what pops immediately for me in this quote. The coping style, which we write about, is this is how 2 7s and 9s problem solve, is they shut down action. They emphasize feeling and thinking. For all three of them, they want you to feel a certain way and want themselves to feel a certain way about the world. The reframing, I think, for the 7 is just one of those tools. Let me spin a way of thinking about things that makes us feel better about the situation, or even more so, let me redirect your focus towards other things in the future, and really pushing into it, because obviously they have so much future orientation of saying, yeah, this was kind of bad. This thing over here, however, is a place that we could move on to. So it's reframing the past, it's avoiding what's present, and let's get our energy moving elsewhere. And it's not about action, it's about thinking about the future, because that will save that, because that's that internal process. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. So last episode in the 5s, we talked about what it means to be a thinking processor. And we said it's being able to step back from an emotion or a situation, I'll say. And that's what 1, 2s, and 6s aren't doing, right? And then it's also being able to see multiple avenues to go down. And thinking processing versus doing processing is like, once you see all the avenues, then you're good, right? And then you can go do, but the doing is not where you need to go, right? Thinking processing is, do I have all of my options? What are all the options, right? And what I also see that here, like 7s, this would be an interesting conversation, like which came first, right? Does your coping style come first, or does your processing center come first? Because if we say coping center comes first, so 7s are hardwired to be positive, then to me, thinking processing seems like a tool to do that. Because if you need to be positive about things, a really good tool to have is to be able to step back, say, okay, there's 14 different ways to view this. Which 5 make me feel the best and the most positive and keeps everybody in the happiest light, right? Okay, I'll focus on those 5, right? So to be able to not be attached to what's really, really happening, and be able to step back and say, which of these 14 different ways to understand this are happiest? Maybe that's where I'll go. I see that there too. That's not me saying I do think coping style comes first. I don't know. But those two things click together easily, in my opinion.
I think I would argue that the processing comes first at some level, because processing is about whether or not you're fulfilling your motive.
Yeah.
For me, coping style kicks in if your motive is not being fulfilled. So like the very first step you take, for the 7, if they don't feel like they're satiated, then they start problem solving, and that is discounting their actions, because those weren't working. If their actions had been working, then they would feel satiated. But since it's not, they shut down their secondary center. That's what the coping style move is for most of the numbers. And then they press into their repressed number, of all things. They want themselves and others to feel a certain way. So the coping style for the 7 is actually elevating feelings. It's elevating the positive feelings, but it is elevating feelings. And it is thinking through that in a way that casts our emotions. And I think you're right here. And the multiple conclusions side of things, for the 5 and 9, they withdraw into their multiple conclusions and live there and get their motive fulfilled at some levels there. That's not the option for the 7. The 7 has to stand independent with all the options with a future focus. But notice what that creates. It creates options. It creates, where are we bouncing next?
Which one of these can I play with?
Yes. And so that's how I see that kind of moving through. When you're not getting your motive fulfilled, kind of get much more positive. And it's the options, like identifying the positivity in the options, that really stands out. Anything else we're saying on reframing there, though? That's because that's the past. That's like dealing with past stuff, or even with the present at some level.
I think it's a present thing. I think 7s reframe as something is happening to them. And then it gets stored in the past as only this altered version, or this half version, I'll say.
Sometimes the reframing can happen with storytelling for 7s. I don't know if you've experienced this, where 7s had something awful happen, but they spin it in a very humorous way.
My only question there would be, are they retconning that, right, as they're telling the story? Or did they literally experience it like that in the moment and they're just telling you the story, right?
I think this
I
actually
don't know.
plays into the motive, because like in one sense they don't want to feel the negative emotions, so why do you want to like jump back into old stories that bring up something negative? But on a secondary front, and maybe even more important, the way that the seven is connecting with other people is to pull them into their headspace. That is the affect. It's pulling people into headspace, and that's how you connect. And so I think they believe that the best way to connect with other human beings is to pull them into humorous, enjoyable, wonderful, imaginated, things that they've imagined. Like the past doesn't really matter. Like the truth of the past doesn't really matter. What matters is the connection through the storytelling. And anyway.
Okay, it's never made sense to me when people say sevens pull people into their heads, because I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Like ones make sense. So we're talking about ones, sevens, and fours here, right? This affect grip. Ones, that makes sense to me. They pull you into like their way of how they want the world to work. So ones ask you to like work with them, right, to make the world better. Fours pull you into their emotions. That makes perfect sense to me. It's like seven. How does a seven pull you into their head? How can you pull someone else into your own head? But if we're talking about thinking processing being just multiple options and not being connected to any one of those options, right? Valuing multiple things. If we instead, just in a different phrasing, say sevens are pulling you into their options, right? So sevens want to present all the options to you, all of these things I thought of. Let's talk about them. Isn't that so fun, right? Let's talk about all of these things we could do. You just got your bonus. Let's talk about all these things we could do with your bonus, right? We're going on vacation next year. All the places we could go. That makes total sense to me. And I don't know why I never connected those two things before, but that makes total sense to me. I experienced the sevens in my life loving when people follow them on the multi scenario train.
That's
right.
What it is.
So
two big ideas come to me there. One is just there's so many comedians who are sevens, and I'm standing in front of you and just telling stories to capture the moment, and like we're not actually going anywhere, but we are going somewhere. Like I'm taking you into your imagination and ways of thinking. The second is like you may be familiar with Peter Pan and like how that story was composed, but for those who don't, like it's written by a seven to a set of kids whose parents died, and it's let me take your hand. I'm going to take you to a different world. We're off to Never Never Land, and we're going to imagine some of these other places where battles are being fought by pirates and we can fly, and it's all about kids and being kind of feral, and how fun is that? And it saves you from the grief of your parents' death. And that strikes me as a good image of the gear the seven can engage. All right, 151 is one for me. Actually, I think we both had this, but I'm going to read the full quote. Anticipation amplifies the seven's natural delight in unlimited possibilities. Their energy for action is fueled by the open-ended question, what's next? This is a terrific space to consider how shared fear and anticipation uniquely drive members of the head triad, 5s, 6s, and 7s, in light of differing reference points and focuses. 5s fear loss of autonomy. They reconcile this fear internally by anticipating what others will require of them. 5s satisfy their need for autonomy by focusing on tasks. 6s fear loss of control. They reconcile this fear externally by anticipating what could go wrong. 6s satisfy their need for control by focusing on others. 7s, in contrast to these two, and this I suppose is what we're talking about, 7s fear loss of freedom. They reconcile this fear independently by anticipating what's possible. 7s satisfy their need for freedom by focusing on self. And then she goes on to talk about the self-focus. The self-focus is real helpful here. Not just the contrast. She's obviously contrasting the head triad, all the numbers in the head triad, contrasting each one of them by elevating each of their stances. But that inward focus at the end, I think, really matters as well. But what do you hear in this quote?
I thought, so I just highlighted the first two sentences where she talks about anticipation amplifies their natural delight and unlimited possibilities. And then she says their energy for action is fueled by the open-ended question, what's next? And I just highlighted that little part because I thought that was a good illustration of thinking preceding doing. So we talked about at the beginning, people see sevens as doers because they're independent and they're out in the world. But if you really notice, sevens are thinking before they do something, right? So it's really the anticipation of the thing that makes the seven happy. Doing the actual thing, they're already thinking about what's going to happen next, right? Like we joke about sevens being flighty and all that stuff, but that's what that really is. It's that while they're doing something, they're thinking about doing what comes next. And they're not thinking about the one single thing that comes next. They're thinking about all the possibilities of what could come next, right?
Yep.
So that's hard to see because thinking processing is so internal kind of inherently. But if you really pay attention to a seven, you will see them do that before they actually get into action, right?
Yep.
That's why it's important to pay attention before you type people. Also, don't type people.
That's well said. This is so in the work of the Berkeley School, they commonly, in my view, misstep with fives and sevens, seeing fives as inwardly focused and sevens as outwardly focused. And this needs to get flipped. And some of the literature recently actually has done the flipping, but we don't understand how internal sevens focus is. The creativity of sevens is there, but here the self-focus that she's elevating, I think, is really important to name. Because again, Enneagram's about motive, Enneagram's about motive, Enneagram's about motive, and they are independent thinkers. And so everything that we see out there is always a servant to the internal thing going on inside the seven. And if you can't see this, you're not going to be able to connect with sevens, and they're going to frustrate you a lot because of what is perceived to be flighty. The self-focus comes first for them. The do I have the resources I need comes first for them. And here, what is it? They reconcile sevens fear the loss of freedom and reconcile that independently by anticipating what's possible. The motive is there. It's not about execution. It's about the fear of being stuck, and the way that they get out is that imagining first.
I'm going to bring up nines, and only very briefly because we're going to talk about them later. But the independent part is important here. Sevens are not looking to other people to see what other people think the possibilities are. They don't. I mean, in real life, sevens probably do get excited when someone's like, oh, we could go do this. Oh, sure. Yeah, right. But they're not. I'm going to contrast that to nines, which are going to represent kind of our responsive thinkers in this space. Is that true, or would sixes be responsive thinkers?
Yeah, they're going to be solitary doers, according to.
I know, but they have a line too.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that because I don't get that. I see where you're going though. Go ahead.
Nines are in that six space, so nines kind of do 3, 9, and 6. Joey would say all do responsive thinking. And what that means is that you can see the difference. Nines look to other people to say, what are the possibilities here, right? What do you think? Every so often, the 9 comes up with a possibility for themselves as well. But sevens, the virtue for 9s is right action, right? Doing the right thing at the right time, in the right order. And so most of the time, 9s are looking outside of themselves for what other people think are the best possibilities here, right? Versus, I only want to bring that up to contrast it to 7s. My 7 friends never look to me to see what they want to do next, right?
Yeah.
If I present a good enough option, they will adopt it. But it has to be good enough, and it has to fit with their agenda of what they kind of already wanted to do anyway. And I would apply that to all the independent numbers, right? Doing, thinking, feeling. We could probably go around the circle and say that about 3, 7, and 8. That's what I see there.
Yeah.
Standing on their own. They know what they want to do next. They're not looking really inward, outward specifically. They're not tethered to either of those places. They can kind of just do whatever they want to do.
I think that's solid reflection. 153 for me. This is at the top. Just 2 sentences. There, the sevens' innate ability to disarm allows sevens to push boundaries without receiving consequences. And when they do want something, they generally get it with relative ease. I like the idea of disarming here. It's just one of the most helpful terms for me for sevens. But one of the things that I wanted to pitch your way and get your response was that the disarming, again, is coming, it feels external. Like I'm trying to make things work out there. But in part, the disarming is a retreat into that mental space and saying, this is how you should imagine what happened. It is a reframing at some point. I realize I screwed this up, but you have to realize how funny this was. And then casting, I need you to think differently about the problem. And that's how they satisfy their motive. Again, desiring freedom, opening up possibilities, living in their head. It all seems to work for me there. What do you think?
What I see here is, so another thing that Joey doesn't write about in this book, but she'll teach you in person if you're ever with her, is why 7 and 9s are positive. I'm not saying like why they get hardwired like that, but what do they gain from being a positive number, from being a positive outlook number? And she says the difference in 7 and 9 versus 2s is that 2s are are positive outlooking for you, and 7 and 9s are positive outlooking for themselves. And that's what I see here. 7s aren't being light and charismatic and funny for you. And I don't want to present that as like it's selfish. It just is. They're not doing it for you. They're doing it so that they can be in an environment where things are light and charismatic and funny because that's what they like, right? They're not doing it. If they didn't want to do it, they wouldn't do it because they're independent numbers. So that's what I see here is 7s really know how to get what they want from their environment.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. And it puts the rest of us at ease. So we like it. Right? So sometimes it feels like it's for us, but it's not. The 7 is trying to get what they want from their world.
Yep.
Which is happy and easy.
Motive.
Yeah.
Motive kicks back in there. You got to just remind yourself of what the motive here is. And I love the contrast with 2s. The 2s are aiming at bonding with you. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the positive spin. I want you to feel like I'm here. I want you to feel like I will be here throughout whatever takes place.
Yeah.
There's no action involved when the 2 is solving problems with positive spin. It's all, I want you to feel something and think something. And they want themselves to feel and think something in that moment. Same story with the 5 and 9. I think you're exactly right. It's not about the bonding. It's about something else.
Yeah.
It's good. Well said. 156. You pointed out this quote. This VP, she's talking about a corporation that she works with. This VP loves whiteboard sessions. He lights up at the prospect of sitting in a room with blank whiteboards on the wall, brainstorming for hours, something that would not be enjoyable for 8s who lead with action. Whiteboards, what do you see?
So she's talking about this VP, for the context of the quote, she had to convince this VP that he was not an 8. He thought he was an 8, and she was like, you're a 7. And she said it took a long time, but one of the things that convinced him was this, that he loves sitting in a room with a blank whiteboard and brainstorming. And she was like, that would drive me, an 8, crazy. Or at least it would be like step -1, right? And then we'd actually get into the actual steps, which is the doing the thing. So I thought this was interesting because I think it illustrates that like seeing the plan, coming up with a plan, understanding the plan, seeing the plan all the way to the end. All of those things are more important to thinking processors than actually doing the plan, right? Than actually executing the plan. I just thought that was a good illustration of that. Do you see anything here?
I think that's spot on. The idea that comes to my mind here is that the 7 just lights up with possibilities. And so often 7s are the starters of things because they're creative and they're thinking about what might be ahead. They're not going to be the builders, the concluders. I remember going to high school with a handful sevens, and going out to dinner or making dinner at home would always be like a place of high enthusiasm, but cleaning up afterwards, the 7 is gone. Like when it's time to actually straighten up, clean up, and put everything away, always would find a way to kind of sneak out of that situation.
Was it a male
starting
7?
of it, I mean, it was male 7.
Yeah.
So these are the buddies I have. So sorry for this, so it's cultural. I mean, I suppose on that front is what you're saying. Yeah. It's a gender dynamic. Comes in.
7 is one of the numbers that Joey teaches. There's a really big difference in genders.
Yeah.
She doesn't teach that very often because I don't think she thinks it's true very often, but she will say 7, particularly male 7s, show up very different than female 7s. And the stereotype of a 7, kind of like the slapstick comedy, not cleaning up dishes after dinner, getting out of the consequences, all of that thing. She's like, that's really more of a male 7. And she says, and I agree with her thinking of the female 7s I know. Like female 7s type a lot as 2s and 9s because they share that positive outlook for sure, but they feel like they're much more relational than the stereotype of a 7. And they're more focused on people, and they wouldn't just leave the room and like not clean the dishes up. Like the personal responsibility that I think is kind of drilled into women makes female 7s show up differently. Like truly kind of a base level show up really differently. So she has a little part about that in this book. She doesn't talk about it very much. But I like to bring that up when we talk about 7s because you really kind of have to make sure you're talking about both genders, right?
Yep.
Because female 7s don't see themselves very as often in the stereotype of 7.
I think that's very well put.
That's the only reason I brought that up.
The way of ease is still going to remain. Mm-hmm. I'd be curious what, like, it may be the case, the like culturally stateside, the 7 female is in a situation where dishes are being done. I would be curious what the way of ease still looks like for that person in that situation where the work's getting done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It may not be like figuring out a way to shirk it altogether, but it might be something else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean there?
Make it fun.
Yeah.
A lot of the 7 females I know are mothers.
Uh-huh. And
they're all known as like the fun mom. One of them literally, that's what her children call her, is the fun mom or something like that. And so I imagine it's, okay, I have to do this thing. What's the most fun we can have while doing this thing, right? So it's not, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to leave the room. I don't think, women get to do that as much. But I can make a lot of fun while I'm doing it. I can make sure my kids have fun, right? And I can make sure the family's having a good time. That sort of thing, I imagine. So maybe putting on some good music or, I don't know, setting up a line to like make the dishes go faster, something like that, maybe.
Yeah. I'd be curious. I don't even remember if we covered this when we talked about gender. By the way, if you haven't seen our series on gender, it's up at aroundthecircle.org, in which we went through all the types in gender dynamics. But the motive is the same across genders. It really is it's what the world is throwing at you, expectation-wise, that's different here. And it's interesting to name here. Worthwhile. Speaking of avoiding tasks, that was the last quote that I had on 7s in the zone 157 near the top. 7s lose more ground with coworkers than they realize when they avoid the task at hand. We value the ways that they make work more enjoyable, as we said, but when we look up from doing and 7s are nowhere to be seen, the negative feeling we're left with has much more staying power in the long run than all the positivity they bring. I suppose it may be the case that quote, in my experience, have just sat with me because I've kind of hit that a handful of times in this conversation. Mostly because I think it's the most insightful and helpful thing for me to know about the 7s who I adore in my life and just understanding the wiring there. But any last words on this element?
I think, so one of the things that Joey says over and over in this book is that most of the people are in that reactive stance, 1, 2, 6. And a lot of other people are action processors. So if you're a 7, you're dealing with the majority of people who are either going to be upset with you specifically because you left, or think that you're not a good worker because you're not working, right? Or to their standard of working. And so I just see her bring this point up over and over and over again. Like, what part of learning the Enneagram is understanding who's around you. And to me, it seems like she's telling sevens, you need to understand the people around you will judge you for these things. And
Yeah.
I mean, we can argue rightfully so or not, right? It just depends where you're standing. To me, rightfully so. To a seven, maybe not. And, you know, you can be fun and light and all the things as long as you want. But if you don't do work on yourself, these people are going to end up not wanting to work with you, right? Probably. So to me, it just seems like that's one of her kind of calls to action to seven, right? Kind of at the end of the chapter is to point out that, you know, I'll tell a story here. My aunt is a seven. And one of the things she said, this always makes me laugh. One of the things she said when she first started doing Enneagram work, she was in Suzanne Stabille's cohort. And she said she literally didn't realize as a seven that people could not like her. Like, she had never thought about the fact that it might be true that people are walking around disliking her. And so I imagine that's what Joey is trying to say here. Like, I know it's not in your hardwiring to believe that people can be against you, but the way that you are, the way that all of us are, inherently makes certain people against us. And so you have to be knowledgeable enough about yourself to know what's going on, right? And why. Because sevens are independent. Like, they won't, if you don't point it out, they won't care, right? They might not notice.
I love this. I think it's a challenge. It's similar to fives at one level. The motive for the 5, 7, and potentially the 9 just might not be relational. That may just be coming well down the line in service to other things. I've said this a handful of times, but 1s, 4s, and 7s, these are the loneliest numbers. These are the numbers that are most likely to do things by themselves. And 7s, just to be frank upfront and talk about things, I think 7s are the most likely number to really wrestle with self-harm, and getting into that space mentally and understanding why matters. But part of it is the detachment from others, the living independently, the being in your head, and reframing. All of those can be fantastic attributes that really have a lot to bring to the world, and they have their shadow side that's just worth naming. And it's worth naming in terms of specifically with our task here, how they process the world can create that. What would you call that? It can be a very black and white way of being in the world, in that it's not right, wrong like 1s. It is positive, negative. And if the 7 gets stuck in negativity, it can be, that can feel debilitating at some levels. So just to name it.
If your whole life you've never developed the skills to handle negative feelings, which 7s don't, I mean, of course, right?
Yes, that's it. And so, if you don't have the tools when life really hits you hard,
and you can't reframe, and there are no other options, then what?
That's what it is. When it feels like things are inescapable, then you have that can be a very difficult spot for some 7s.
Yeah.
Bang. I feel like I'm ending on a downer. So what's one last positive about 7s?
I hear from almost every 7 I've met, especially women, that they wish people took them more seriously.
Yeah.
And so I think part of understanding thinking processors is that we can get into the mind of a 7 and realize that they are really thinking and very intelligent people. Again, I'm not drawing a line between thinking and intelligence. What I'm trying to say is that we just see the outside flightiness of 7s, and we assume that they have not thought about what they're doing, and that they're just jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing, and they're not thinking about it, like all the things.
Yeah.
If you understand thinking processing, you know how deep the 7 sees everything and how interested they are in things. And I mean, they're not going to do something if they don't want to do it, but if they do want to do it, like, they'll go all in on it. But that kind of is all hidden behind this lightness of the 7. So I guess 2 things. One, if we are not a 7, it's up to us to recognize that in our 7s and realize they are much deeper than we thought. If you are a 7, it is up to you to show people what's behind your jovial nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
However you want to say that, right? Because that's all people are going to see if that's all you present. So if you want people to know you, you have to make a space for people to know you. But that's what I would say about that. I hear that from 7s all the time. And so I do think the stereotype of a 7 is kind of harmful to our 7 friends and loved ones, because they don't want to be known just for slapstick and getting out of stuff, like I said, making everything happy all the time. So
I understand where the misconception comes from. It might be because 7 is my security move, that I'm so attracted to the thinking of 7s. So many of the writers that I enjoy most are 7s. I think Stephen King's a 7. I'm really into King's stuff. There's a handful. I studied theology and philosophy forever. A lot of the people who do really high level thinking in those 2 fields are 7s, and I'm just super attracted to their energy. They can look at the world from 30,000 feet up and really give dynamic presentations of what they see in ways that are creative, inventive, humorous, are just filled with energy. Mm-hmm. And those are, I just adore that element of 7s in my life. So, thinking processors. You're surrounded by great 9s, is what I hear.
I am. I have a spicy 9. So Joey, in her chapter about 9s, she says she thinks wings don't matter that often, except for a few cases, and one of those cases is a 9 with an 8 wing. She says she calls them spicy 9, and I'm pretty sure that's what my sister is. But Jace is a pretty classic 9, my fiance. So I got all the types, all the different types, and our beloved TJ is a 9.
This is true. Longtime listeners will also know that my beloved mother was a 9, and so we're surrounded by some 9 energy, if you can call it that.
Yes, they're body types. They have an energy.
They do have an energy, actually, easy. Which I imagine we're going to talk quite a bit about. Yeah. The idea that they are thinking processors, again, incredibly helpful in terms of the places in my world where I kind of struggle to connect with the 9s I love most. Just knowing that this is the space they live, the desire for ease, that this has been instructive. So I'm going to start on page 75. The determination that fuels 9s is the most obvious in the space where culture demands speed and the 9 simply resists. 8s, 9s, and 1s are all fueled by determination. As 2 of the 3 types who process with doing, 3s being the 3rd type, 8s and 1s tend to dig in their heels most in the way that demand action from themselves and others. Being the primary type in the gut triad means that 9s are fueled by determination, but do not process with doing, shifting to process with a preferred thinking center instead. 9s are resolute in the ways that they control their own time and space and will not be moved to act in a manner or at a pace that's not of their choosing. In other words, determination fuels doing for 8s and 1s and fuels not doing for 9s. That's a good last line there.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
I think that lines up with Joey's. A lot of people teach us about 9s is that 9s know what they don't want to do much easier than they know what they do want to do. So Joey has another line in here where she's like, if you need a 9 to make a decision, you have to switch the fill in the blank to multiple choice. Like if you're the boss of a 9 and you need them to make a decision, you got to give them 3 options. You can't just say, do something by 3 p.m., right? I brought that up because what I thought was interesting here is just like Joey said, they're starting in the body center and then they're switching. And so they're not meeting themselves or others with action. So doing something and changing your physical world does not occur to a 9, right? They don't do that for themselves and they don't do that for you. What they do is think. I'll be interested. Okay, maybe this is getting too far into it too early. So 5s and 7s are thinking of possibilities because possibilities lines up with freedom, right? 5, 6, and 7s are wanting certainty. They're wanting, maybe not freedom, but they're wanting certainty, right? And so to get certainty, if you think of a lot of things, you just got to pick the best one, right? Can you connect for me how thinking helps a 9 get agency?
Yeah. Solidified in my heart now is something that you and I discovered, and it's that 3, 6s, and 9s are detaching, in my view, from their primary center. The detachment really matters because they detach when they feel uncomfortable. And I want to say that that's what's taking place in the why for the 9. Why are you moving off of your center in the body? Well, the uncomfort takes over. So moving into the head center, the primary question on their mind is, how do I make my body feel comfortable again? And that's where they're going to live for a while. So they're going to live there, and it's both going to be a question of, how do I get control? How do I get agency? How do I make the world into a place that it's supposed to be? One of the things that TJ said this weekend that was real helpful was that 9s can be in very chaotic spaces if those spaces are designed for chaos. Mm-hmm. So he used to do professional sound engineering. He has, done sound in 1,000-person rooms that were very loud and very, filled with a certain kind of energy that comes with rock concerts and the rest. But that's the appropriate place for that. And he easily enters that space because he feels connected and because he feels like everything is as it should be. And especially as a 9, he is bringing something to that space that insists on control of the space so that he's connected, they're connected, nothing's out of sorts. He goes nuts when you're at an event and the sound engineering or the light engineering is off. It's the thing that throws it. It's his biggest pet peeve for sure. That seems to me what's going on there in the pivot to processing with thought. It's, I need to engage hard. How do I get the control I want back home? He's going to go to work, as we've said. He's going to go to work in his head so they can bring back some of the answers for getting control at home and fulfilling that need. What do you think about that?
So I have a metaphor in my head, and I don't know if it's right, and I don't know if it's good. But what I'm picturing in my head is, so Joey says that the 9's motivation is to avoid, which I always thought was interesting. And I didn't know if I super agreed with it. Because other people will say they have a motivation to be stable, right? Or to avoid conflict or whatever. And I like the to be stable. Because it brings up what you just said. 9s can exist in very high energy spaces as long as that's what it's supposed to be, right? They can exist in chaotic spaces as long as it's supposed to be chaotic. Stable does not mean quiet, right? Or low energy. It just means the same. So I'm picturing in my mind, like, we used to watch, did you ever watch that show Meerkat Manor?
No, tell me.
It's like a National Geographic show that my family used to watch when we were little girls.
Oh, I am aware of this.
You know what I'm talking about?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, it just follows like a family of meerkats, like over the course of a year or whatever. And it's fun. They do little narrations and stuff. But long story short, the reason I'm thinking of that is because meerkats have all these little tunnels in the dirt. They're diggers, right?
Yeah.
And their tunnels go everywhere, and they're very complicated. And you can, like, I think I'm not making this up. Part of why that is because, like, if a predator gets down into a tunnel, then the meerkat knows where to go, right? It can, like, shoot off into this side tunnel and avoid the predator. I think that come up in me because I'm viewing 9s as people who, instead of making themselves comfortable, they see something coming at them that's going to make them uncomfortable, be that a person or an environment or whatever. And like a little meerkat, they go into their mind and they offshoot into like a different possibility or a different place or a different way of being. And they kind of avoid the thing that was coming at them, right?
Multiple conclusions.
Does that metaphor make sense to you? I don't know why meerkats specifically, but I'm just picturing nines. Instead of going at the thing, they're just like stepping to the side, right? And thinking processing helps with that, because thinking processing makes this big tunnel system. And if you need to get out of the way, it's very helpful to have a bunch of different places you can go, right? So that's why the thinking processing is the tunnel system that gives the nines all the different ways they could react to the thing that's making them uncomfortable or unstable or whatever. And then they kind of offshoot into that other thing.
Yep.
I don't really know if that works. Nines, would love to hear your thoughts, even if it's like, Katie, that was dumb.
I'm going to quote you back to you on this one. It's thinking in service of agency.
Yeah.
And the thinking that's taking place, again, to quote you back to you, is multiple conclusions. You can see multiple options in order to get the agency desired.
Yeah.
And
well, I chose this option. So that's how I'm getting my agency. I chose to be over here.
It's both I chose to be over here, and because there's multiple options being seen, they can also pick the one that's easiest. And so both those, it may not be escape in the way that a meerkat might desire. It might be something else. It's like, how do I pivot such that the least amount is expected of me or required from me?
I like the easiest. That goes in line with the ease of the thinking processors. They all want ease. And I'm also thinking of, when I talk to nines, they talk to me a lot about activation energy. And so they say that I know I need to make this big decision to make my life better. I know I need to go back to school. I know I need to get a divorce, whatever it is, right? And I know my life will be better when I do it. For sure, I know that. And I can't do it. Like, I can't get the energy to do it. So I'm wondering if maybe part of the work for a nine is not to not become a thinking processor, right? You're always going to be a thinking processor, but maybe force yourself to choose one of the other options instead of the easiest one.
Yeah.
Because you're already hardwired to see other options. It's just that you don't have the energy to pick anything other than the stable one, right? Or you don't want, or you're not motivated to, or whatever. So
one of the things I don't think we understand about nines is their primary fear. This is where the shadow starts, in my view. Their primary fear is disconnection. They actually want to be connected to everyone. One of the strategies for doing this, has to do with their head. Is if I can see multiple perspectives, if I can see where everybody else is at, then I can ensure that I can connect with them in those spaces. The multiple options of making things easy, sometimes it means just be quiet right now. Allow so-and-so to talk who I clearly disagree with, but I don't want to be disconnected from this person. And I certainly don't want to confront them. And so, like, navigating that, a common image for us is sticking fingers in a dam, until, like, the nine has, 9 fingers in these little cracks in a dam, and that 10th one, they're trying to stretch their thumb to get it, and that's where they live, and that's why they have so little energy. It's just juggling all the balls. That's the thinking in service of agency, the control they want, the connection they desire. That's the justice at their heart, the shalom that is truly their target. And the ways that multiple conclusions work is they can see all these various vantage points all at the same time, and perhaps at their best can say, here's a way forward where all of us are still on the same page, because I can see your perspective, I can see their perspective. Here's a path forward that gets what you want, what he wants, and what I want. That can be really damaging to the nine. That could be really positive to the nine. That could be really positive for us.
That brings up Joey's idea that nines are others referenced, so they are not in the external stance, but they focus on others a lot, and they want others to get along, and they want to get along with others, and they defer to others, is what she says. Is that what she says? I think that's what she says. So I see that there too. And she brings that up as well. The deferring to others and the thinking processing make nines phenomenal mediators, and it makes them horrible in a debate because they automatically see everyone else's point of view and they can hold everyone else's point of view.
TJ cannot help recently, but hear me and Kristen going off on each other about some topic, and he can't help but say, well, this is all semantics.
Yeah.
And that is the through line for peace
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
It's like, if you just recognize that what you're really squabbling about on is just the words being used, and not like you're not actually disagreeing.
Yeah.
And I'm routinely pissed off about this move, because I'm like, this whole podcast is about semantics and I want to debate terms. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm here, philosopher that I am.
Yeah.
So, but the posture, praiseworthy, is to see a golden way forward for everyone.
And they're right, usually. They're not just, that's the thing, they're not just making stuff up so that everyone is happy again and like hopes that people go along with it. They do genuinely find a middle ground between two people. A real middle ground between two people that people can rest on, which I think is very impressive.
I have a quote from 77 at the bottom of 77. She has a story about thinking that she was smarter than her husband, and she insisted on taking an IQ test with him. She said she did what any self-respecting young woman in her position would do, and after they were debating their intelligence, I suggested that we take an IQ test. I'll not keep you in suspense. My 9 husband has a higher IQ than I do. It's important to remember when considering the slow processing speed of 9s that there's no direct correlation to a lack of intelligence. You've talked about this quite a bit. That what comes to your mind in terms of them processing with thinking?
So I'll tell what I usually teach about 9s, and then I'll connect it to thinking processing, because I haven't done that specifically before. What I talk about when I talk about slow processing speed is your processing speed is how quickly you feel comfortable signing off on something. So 3, 7, and 8s, we look at something. If we don't immediately see a problem and we can think it through to the end really fast and there's not like a glaring problem anywhere, done, signed, let's go.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And what I used to think was happening with Jace, my fiance, who is a 9, who is a slow processor, is that when I would give him a plan of what I want to do, and he would say, well, just give me a little bit of time to think about it, right? Let's say, I want to buy my favorite thing to do is send him a house on Zillow and be like, I want to buy this one, even if we're not really going to buy a house. And when I first started doing that, I think he thought that I like really, really did want to buy the house, right? So
Sure.
He took it really seriously and was like, okay, well, let me think about it. Or, we'll be doing budget stuff, or we'll be whatever, like anything, like a lot of it is future oriented because I'm a 3, but whatever. What I thought was happening was that I was giving him a plan and he was looking at it and he saw something that was going to go wrong. And because he's a 9, he's conflict averse, and he had to get some time to wrap his head around it and how he was going to tell me and kind of dive into it a little further, right? But I assumed that he saw something that made him not sign off on it immediately. And what I know now, because we've talked about it, is that he can look at one of the plans I come up with and it looks awesome. It looks perfect. There's no holes. Everything looks great. And he'll still take a day or two to think about it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I teach is just how fast do you get to the point where you're comfortable signing off on something. I think there's a lot of pros to being a slow processor. I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of stuff with my wedding planning that if I'd taken like a day or two more to think about it, it probably would be a little better. Like if I was a 9, I probably would have picked maybe a better person for this or a better person for this, but I'm a 3. So I looked it up on Google and was like, sign a contract, right? Because I wanted to be done. So there's a lot of pros, I think, that come with slow processing. And to connect it to thinking, this is the part I don't know, and I would be interested in asking Jace or TJ or whoever. I imagine one of the things that they are processing through is all the options they see. I was going to say that thinking processing inherently makes you a slower processor, but that's not true because 7s are fast. So I just imagine if you are already a slow processor, if you're also a thinking processor, you're going to have to sort through all these things that you see, and you're going to have to spend time with each of them. And only at the end of that process will you say, okay, I think this is the best option.
Yep.
Right. I think that's what I would say about that. Do you have anything?
I've been thinking on something that came up in our 8 or maybe our 3 conversation that has just really hit me as strong, that some of the motives that we have are very, very complicated. And some of the types have motives that are not complicated at all.
Yeah.
Eight's motives are not complicated. How do I not feel vulnerable? And they come to conclusions very fast and have a radar for action that moves, because I think their target is really, really small. I think three's target generally is pretty small. It has to do with how I'm going to win and get the attention that I desire. I think the target of twos, sixes, and nines is enormous.
Why?
And so, like, where twos are going to want to get attention, but they are putting their mental energy into all of the relational dynamics, the complexities that might be there, all the counterfactuals, all the different possibilities that might be taking place, is where they invest their mental energy. I think it's easier to see with sixes. Sixes are envisioning all the things that could possibly go wrong. There are 182,000 checks that might need to take place before I can actually act if I move into excess there. But I think nines are of this sort as well. What is it that might specifically break in my relationships and in the things that I care about? I'm going to do an inventory. I'm going to do full inventory of everything that I care about that works together in harmony for my sense of self, place in the world. And, if we buy this house 20 miles away, how's that going to affect my job, my commute, my family life, each of the relationships that I have? I need to do a quick check for 182 things. And that becomes the slow processing, I think, that's taking place for those folks. I'm a slow processor sometimes. I'm a real fast processor other times, and I know why. What do you think?
I just think based on what you just said, 2, 6, and 9 should be slow processors then. But we're 4, 5s, and it's a stance thing. 4, 5, and 9 are slow processors. So I think your theory doesn't work.
Do you think 5s are slow processors as well?
Are you saying you don't agree with assigning processing speed to stance?
I don't think it necessarily needs to be a triad. I'm just saying I think these types, their motive is kind of interesting here, that their motive is really complicated. Their motive in order to fulfill their motives, 182 things need to get checked, whereas the motives of 3s, 1s, 8s, for example, don't.
I don't know if I agree with that, and I don't know why. I'd have to think about it. But I feel weird saying that some people's motives are smaller than others. And I'm not saying less
smaller.
important. I know that's not what you're saying, but something about that just doesn't feel correct to me.
That's entirely fine. I'm shooting from a hip on a lot of these things. It feels like the motive for 8s, let's go there, just feels like a simpler target.
Why?
To hit.
What about it makes it simpler?
It doesn't require 182 checks. It requires 3 checks.
I mean, maybe. I think you could break those 3 checks down into a bunch of like what? Like, what are the 3 checks?
I got my small circle. Am I in danger? Moving forward.
Well, am I in danger? That could be 150 things. Where are you looking, right?
I think they check their intuitive center. I don't think they're necessarily, it's not similar. It's not a 5, 6, 7. It's not a head. They're not processing danger through their head in the ways that the head triad would. They're processing danger intuitively.
Why don't 9s do that?
Do what? To process danger?
Yeah.
Well,
do it intuitively. They're in the body center.
They do, but it's not. Their vulnerability isn't going to be the primary fear for the 9. Disconnection is going to be the primary fear for the 9, and disconnection has multiple people involved, and those, like, thinking through all of the different people and how they're going to respond. If I say this, how is it going to affect the 82 relationships I have? And that's where the processing goes slow. Where the 8 can just say, am I in danger? Nope. Feel good. Let's move. Where are we doing next Thursday? There's also an orientation to time.
Yeah.
In terms of their stance as well, but
I feel like I want to say it's not actually bigger or smaller, but we react to them in a faster or slower way. Like we think the details matter or we don't.
Yes.
Which feels different to me than saying the actual size of the motivation is bigger. I also don't know I don't know what that, what does it mean for a motivation to be bigger or small? Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Just more, I'm saying more complex. Like
But
it's you can have big dreams.
I feel like that goes
complexity
very
of it is
anti-Enneagram to say that some of these 9 types are less complex, or
it's that their motive is more easily fulfilled.
is it though?
Well, that would be my argument.
Is my motivation more easily filled than a 2's?
I'll tell you what. So this is how theory works. I'm telling a story about why it's the case that 9s are slow processors, and that story, in my view, kind of makes sense of it. They have 182 checks they need to run in their mental life prior to speaking, prior to acting, whereas the 3 doesn't. 3's got 3 checks that they got to hit. Bang, bang, bang. Let's go. And that makes sense to me about why it appears. Because as has been said, it's not like the 9 is less intelligent. So the question would be, and maybe this is to be floated to our dear listeners, if you want to comment on Patreon, let me know your thoughts. But why is it the case that the 9 is a slow processor?
Can it not be that that inherently some people want to take more time than other people? Are you saying you want that to come from somewhere?
Since it's not about intelligence, what does it do to? And I think so. If you say they want to take more time,
how comfortable you are with being uncomfortable, I don't know. Maybe 4, 5s, and 9s, because they're not doing processors. To get into action, they really, really, really have to feel comfortable with what they're doing. 4, 5s, and 9s need to really process everything before they actually do it, because doing is just last. 3, I want to get to doing as fast as possible. So I'll sign off on some things, right? Sure. That is different. Again, I'm not saying that's correct. I don't know, just another option. But I don't think that some motivations are more or less complicated or complex.
Something to sit on. I'm going to sit on this. I might bring it back up.
Yeah.
If something pings for me that kind of opens up these doors, but something going on there.
To be clear, I also will admit I don't want to believe that. So maybe it is true and I just don't want to believe it. But I don't know, something in me is I want that to not be true. So if it is, that sucks.
The thing that allows me to get speed with decision makings is outsourcing my thinking to a system. If I have a system, then I'm flying.
Then you're not thinking.
Correct.
Yeah. Is that what you said? Your decision making or your thinking? Sorry, did I
my decision making? Yeah.
Sorry.
But you're entirely right. I have to think about what the system says, and then it makes it fast. I'm not thinking as you're saying, but I think this is similar for the 3s at some level. If they know what the culture is going to reward, or what the people that they love most, or want the affirmation of, what they value most, if they know what the target is, only one question. 9s are trying to hold the world together. That's really different, you know?
Are they though?
I get the sense. Well, tell me what your sense is.
Are 9s just not trying to feel comfortable?
But it requires the world being held together.
Sure, or it requires you avoiding the world.
Well, that's an option also.
That sounds like a 2 thing to me. To hold the world together.
That is the option, is it not, for the 9 who's in a board meeting?
Yeah.
I can engage, but it's going to take me really thinking through things, the 182 checks that I want to do prior to me engaging. And is very common for the 9, they mentally check out.
Yeah.
And that's exact, and it's fulfilling the motive on both fronts.
Right.
But it's exposing why that is happening. I could do all this thinking work, or
my quote on 78 is
Yes,
perfect for this.
Let's. Would you like to read
Let
it?
me say it. So Joey talks about she does panels when she is doing corporate teaching. She says a panel question that consistently produces quality teaching points is this: what do you wish others on your team knew about you? To this day, I refer back to the answer offered by a young 9 panelist whenever I am consulting managers of 9s. He said, when we are in staff meetings, it takes all the energy I have to keep up with the pace of the conversation and rapid fire questions and responses. To then raise my voice above the rest to offer my input or viewpoint seems literally impossible. And so I think that lines up exactly with what you're saying. It is.
That's exactly right.
I highlighted that because it's a good illustration of it takes the wandering aspect of thinking processing, where you're kind of wandering through all these options. I thought this highlighted a really good example of how much energy it takes to come out of that and into right now, right here. And what are we doing right here, right now? And what do we need to do? But it also brings up it takes a lot of energy for these people to come forward and meet the rest of us in the action that we're asking them to do, right?
Correct.
And if my whole personality is built around avoiding and spending the least amount of energy possible because I don't have that much, because I am boundaried internally and externally like 9s are against anger, then of course I'm going to choose the checkout option. 8 out of 10 times, of course I'm going to choose the checkout option. Or I choose the option where I listen and maybe I bring my thoughts to you later. But certainly, very rarely do I actually say the thing in the meeting at the time that we're talking about it.
I think it's again the case. I'm putting myself in the shoes of a 9. They're in a board meeting. The 8 is making a claim. This is how we dominate next Thursday. The 9 is immediately hearing conflicts coming, and I need to do a check on how this person's actions are going to affect everything in the company, everything in this room, all the relationships I care about, and whether or not this will be an expenditure of my energy moving forward. The 8's just saying, how do I dominate next Thursday? Those are two very different motives, and one takes just a whole lot less effort to think through.
Maybe
that's how I would process that.
Unless the 8 is bringing, here's how we dominate next Thursday. I've thought about all the things. I've planned them out. Here are the details. Go do your job. That is a lot to think about.
As we've said about the 8s, though, I think they're not thinking with multiple conclusions in the ways.
No, that's not.
Processing
No. That's not what I meant. 8 saying, here we're going.
Yeah, correct.
I have thought about the details. We talked about that in our action processors, right?
No, I get you. Yeah. And even worse, they're coming to the table with a plan.
Yeah.
That they've already pre-thought through.
Yes.
Now, I can see it commonly being the case. Not that I have any experience on this front, but that the 8 simply intuitively says this is what we're going to do next Thursday. And I don't know what her language is for this, but it's great. It's like you can't move them off that. Mm-hmm. But the 9 can't live there. The 9's in a board meeting with the energetic 8, thinking through all the fallout in real time, having to do thinking. I don't know. That just makes sense to me. So,
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just maybe feel like the conclusion is wrong.
That works. Yeah.
I totally agree with you that 9s do a lot more mental work, right, than like an 8 or a 3 does. I totally agree with that. I see almost every other number doing a lot more mental work than I do on almost everything. So I totally agree with that. I don't think that makes me conclude that my motivation is smaller.
Of course not. It's again, hear the language. I
or
think
more
it's
pointed.
just less. I just think it's less complicated.
Or less complicated. But I don't think that's true. Maybe 8 3. Maybe what's happening is 8 3s and 7s. We have an equally complex motivation, but we only trust these 3 tools to do it. Right? Maybe that could. So we're quicker to pick up. These are the 3 things we know how to solve this problem. Maybe if you're not there, you have a whole plethora of tools at your disposal. I don't know. I just feel like there could be a lot of answers for that. And to say that a motivation is less to me, you know why I don't want to say that? Because your motivation is what you're built off of as a human. And to me, that sounds like some people are less complex.
That's what I'm hearing you conclude by my statement. I don't think that's what I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah.
Though.
But I don't know how you wouldn't conclude. Like if your Enneagram number is who you are.
In my view, complexity is not a virtue. In fact, I would push the opposite way. Simplicity actually is a virtue. The requirement of energy to think through 882 checks versus 3 checks, it seems to me the 3 checks, I'm going with 3 checks every time in terms of like, why would I want to waste my energy on these other things? Now, granted, those who overthink on these fronts, the 6s, 9s in particular, they do great service to the rest of us in terms of devoting their mental life to our well-being and making sure that things don't break on these fronts.
Maybe I don't like that you're calling me simple. To say that your motivation is more complex or more simple means that you have to do less work to get over it. That's what I'm also hearing, right? Well, 3 only has to get over 3 things. And a 9 has to get over 182 things. And I don't think that's true, because then we would have a lot of healthy 3, 7, and 8s walking around. And I don't think we do.
Well, I mean, you might target things that aren't healthy. Those 3 things may like move you into spaces that do damage to you and to your relationships. Like you may be like, we're all aiming at happiness in my view, but a lot of times we're mistaken about what's going to make us happy and those around us happy.
So those 3 things are bigger than the 182 things that the 9 has to do?
It's just that, so where the energy devoted, I think this, I'm talking myself into this. I think the idea that we all have different levels of energy is a massive mistake. I think we all have the same amount of energy. It's being funneled through our 3 centers, and it's just getting bottlenecked for the 9, given how much energy they're devoting to the things that they care about most. You don't have that problem. So your motive, that energy flows right through you in terms of your mental life into your action. And where most of your energy is going is in that space. And you're constructing stuff, building stuff, moving things forward, doing the work.
But does that mean I have less complex stuff, or I just have more energy to handle the complex stuff?
I think that I'm gonna be out on a limb here and saying you have the same energy as your fiance does. The difference is that all of his energy is going to his mental life, and all of your energy is going to your physical execution.
I think a 9's energy goes to keeping anger in and keeping anger out. I think that's where a lot of their energy goes.
That's one of the things they're thinking about, though.
You're arguing something right now that's totally separate from what you just were arguing. Now we're talking about energy?
Well, it's that okay, well, let me put them together. It's that the 182 checks is what's going on in their mental life, but energy is required for their mental life. I don't know how else to pitch this. It seems to me that the slow processing is here. It's like if you have a computer, and you know what it's like when like all the energy is going into the computer, but if it's running 182 programs versus running the 3 programs just function faster. That doesn't mean that the 182 programs that are going on aren't important. Were you looking at me?
I was looking at you, and then I looked at myself, and I was like, just making the worst face ever. Okay.
I hate to tell you this, but this happens occasionally.
Here's another thing I'm thinking of.
Okay, let's do it.
Jace, when we talk about slow processing speed, he talks about he is super uncomfortable with putting forth a wrong opinion.
He's thinking about the fallout as well. It's not just is this right or wrong. He's thinking about the fallout.
I guess I don't understand. Like, why don't you think it can just be that some people want more time to think about? Why can't that just be the answer? I guess I don't know why we're coming up with all this other stuff.
Yeah. Part of me wants to justify my existence as a philosopher because the only question I ask is why. And so like the coming to find the patterns, what are the patterns? Like what explains what's going on here for me has prima facie value. It's valuable in and of itself to talk about why things are the way they are. For me, just specifically on the theory side, it may be the case that this is unknowable. Why mental processing is slower. But I'm just looking for something, and that at least is a story that makes sense to me.
Are you saying that 2, 6, and 9 are the slowest processors? So you're changing it from 4, 5, and 9?
I'm saying is that 6s also, I think, have slow deliberation speed, and it would
counterphobic
be caused
6s too.
By the same. Well, actually, I mean that might be something that you could bring into play, because at some levels is the motive, how you're adjusting to your motive, might matter there. I need to think through that. I don't know.
Have you ever tried to stand in front of a 2 who's decided that they're going to do something for you?
Tell me about this.
An unhealthy 2 is not spending a lot of time. I mean, they're spending a lot of time thinking about what people need from them, but then they're very quickly solving those things, right? They're like, I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then I'll...
Maybe it has nothing... Maybe... Okay. I'm going to defer. You are correct.
No, don't do that. That's lame.
Sometimes the things that we end up caring about take very little thinking energy, and sometimes they take quite a bit of thinking energy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more often the case that the thinking energy that the 9 requires, it's commonly the case that the 9 finds themselves in places where the things that they want require more thinking energy.
I think they think that the things they want require more thinking energy.
But they are slow. Well, that's the claim, isn't it? Is that they're slow processors. I
don't even know what we're fighting in about anymore. I don't know where we started. I don't know.
You just want to be complicated.
It was fun though. Yeah, I do. And I feel like this is a total feeling. I don't have the thoughts to back it up yet. So take that as you will. I think it is a misstep to say that one of the 9 base ways you can be built as a human. The whole point of the Enneagram is to see all the numbers equally, right? There are equal pros to all the numbers and there are equal cons to all the numbers. None of them are better or worse. And so to say that some of them are less complex, like the thing that you just said about complexity not necessarily being better, that I was like, okay, that, I understand that. But I don't feel right about that. Saying that. I just feel like people react to their complexity in different ways. And I don't have any other words for that either.
Do you think some people are simple? Some types
I would say 9s are simple. 9s, what you see is what you get. What's going on in them, in their brains, may not be super simple. Like that, like...
I think this is what's pushing against that idea right here.
No, I'll sign off on 9s being complex and their mental energy being complex. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But
they come across simple.
They come across simple, right?
Yeah.
And they are like, it's easy. It's easy to get along with a 9 because they are simple. It's what you see is what you get. It's really easy to get along with 9s because there's not much to butt up against.
Perhaps it's the case. Okay, so I'm arguing that not the type is simple or complex. I'm arguing that the motive, the fulfillment of the motive is simple or complex. Some motives can be fulfilled very easily and some take quite a bit of effort mentally.
So do some people get their motive faster than other people? What do they do after that? What do they do with all the time after they get their motive?
They try to win the second trophy.
But that's me still wanting my motive.
Yeah.
It's never fulfilled.
Nobody's
I guess I'm hearing
like truly fulfilled.
I mean, I just think it's in how you present it. I could present and say all a 9 has to do is avoid. That's all they have to do. It's really simple. It's one move.
Well,
right?
But I'm positive you know what it looks like for that to not work in the long run.
I agree, but I think you could do that with all the numbers. You could say all a 3 has to do is prove they're valuable. That's all. They just have to win.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? That could mean a million, right? There's a million different things that go into winning.
Well, this gets into foundational kind of stuff for us, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, what is the overlap of your fulfilling your Enneagram motive and you truly being happy, thriving, and flourishing as a human being? Those have a very complicated relationship that probably needs to get parsed out.
Yeah. Anyway, would love to hear thoughts from people. Would love to hear thoughts from people. Comment your thoughts below.
Trucking now. We had a long weekend. And
here we are. And now we're fighting. Just kidding. We're not fighting.
Page 80. She writes, the 9 utilizes patience and objective reason to unify others on a path that is both right and good for all. So helpful that we have new and different, much more constructive language for objective reason that we can employ here now. But what do you see in this quote?
I see this other referenced. Mm-hmm. By the way, I think that Joey teaches that 2, 6, and 9 are other referenced. So you're also picking up on that as well. Yeah.
Well, that would be an overlap then.
Yeah. Anyway, I see that others reference. So 9s are thinking about others. They utilize their thinking processing to help others. So this goes with what I said with the 7s earlier. 7s aren't thinking processing to help you, right? Mm-hmm. They're getting options for them. Mm-hmm. And of course, we all have a motivation, so we're all doing things for ourselves. But 9s also offer you the multiple options, right? That's why 9s make great pastors. That's why they make good therapists, because they can see multiple ways forward, and then they want to give those options to you and see you travel them, right? That's why they make good mediators, all the things. So that's what that's what I saw here, is using thinking processing, one for yourself, but also for the betterment of others.
I think using the language that we hit on last time with 5s, that 9s utilize patience and multiple conclusions to unify others, is a great way to understand what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. It's not about objectivity deduction, because if you're being truly objective, it might be the case that other people are clowns. 9s aren't going to point that out. They might see it.
Yeah, but they might think
if they did see it and they were being objective and then they unified others, that might not be a worthy way to approach what?
Maybe only if you care about only if you care about pointing out that people are clowns more than you care about unifying others. If you don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, actually, I think you're putting your thumb on what's important here. Is like, what is the target for our behavior? If it's unity for unity's sake, yes, you Nazis are invited. Come sit at the table.
Well, I mean, think about the unhealthiest 9.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I go as far as Nazis, but like 9s do invite people to the table that like maybe shouldn't be at the table, right? Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of numbers can do that, but that is the problem with 9s sometimes, right? Is that they extend peace to too many people and they don't want to face things, right? I've heard you talk about that. You can cut this if you want. I've heard you talk about that with your mother, right? Like, I don't want to face things, and so I'm just going to pretend that everybody belongs at the table, right? So
is that objective reason? Certainly she can see the deep problems in this person if objective reason was employed.
Sure. Do you think she doesn't see the problem? I think 9s see the problem and then they choose stability over the problem.
Being able to hold multiple conclusions in your head, and then the positivity that comes in is what's at play. It's not objective reason. It is, I see your point of view and I'm going to optimistically elevate your perspective for the sake of fulfilling my motive. That's what's going on.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We just won't use objective reason because I know we have problems with what that means. But
no, I'm pushing against it to showcase why this is not a valuable concept, which matters to me here. Notice what's actually taking place is what I want to highlight. And it's also the case for the path that's both right and good for all. I don't think that's what's at play. I think their motive is primarily about themselves, fulfilling their motives, I should say, just like we all are.
I think because you're a 1, someone using the phrase right and good for all is going to mean something very, very specific to you.
That's probably true. Yeah.
And so I actually don't disagree with you. Like,
the same thing could be said for the 9.
Right.
It would be an identical thing.
It is right and good for us to all get along.
That would be subjective,
right?
At that level.
Sure. The objective reason, I think Joey uses objective reasons in the place that we would use like the multiple options, right? I think that's part of what she means when she uses that. So if we could take that word out and put in maybe multiple options here, then that's what I think that kind of means. But I do think what's part of what's happening is we're reading what's right and good for all, and all of us are going to have a different definition of what is right and good for all.
Correct.
9s think it is right and good when everybody is getting along.
Right. And I suppose she specifies that.
Yeah.
So
a 1 obviously would not agree with that if someone at the table is bad.
Jackie and Kristen routinely are pointing out now that I immediately go to the most extreme example to prove my points.
Yes, you do.
This is just basic philosophy. I apologize. You cast.
It's okay.
It's how logic works. It's when you talk about universals and particulars. This is just how you debate.
I also think you do that because you're a 1. And so it's good for people to listen.
You're saying I'm a bad person.
I am saying that. Yeah. That is what you should get from what I just said. Right.
Now we're on the same page.
I think here's 2 things you do when you argue. Now that we're exposing everybody, you do use extremes, which I think is very 1. And you also, you assume your value judgments of things are shared by other people. And so I just saw what's right and good, what you think is right and good. Sometimes I have to remind, other people are going to think differently about that, right? So those are the 2 things. Anyway, you can expose me too if you want, but those are the 2 things I see when we debate. And I don't think either of those are good or bad. I think they just are. I think they make you a 1.
Your flaws in our debate style is that you always come with class character and want to elevate us and make us look amazing.
Your other flaw is that you're not mean. My 2 mother tells me that I always ask one more question than she would ask. I always go one question further than she would. And so I hear that there as well.
For the sake of
bringing it out. Because I actually don't care how this question makes you feel because it's important. Like, I don't care about how you feel. I care about how the debate goes. And I want it to be a good debate, right? And if we just ignore some stuff because it's too deep to bring up, well, that's stupid, right? That's not good. So that's... Maybe. Right? Maybe. That's... Hear me when I say that. That is not always a good posture to bring to an argument with somebody, right? But I'm saying that's the 3 in me is more concerned about being honest and being true and like really getting to the core of it versus keeping a relationship with somebody because I am not hardwired like that, right? So, and that's not even an 8 would listen to this and be like, that's not true because an 8 is way more like that than I am. But I think I am a little more like that than a 2. For example. But anyway.
This is a great example that I would love for you to listen back to about the engagement of 3s of their head center. I think everything you said was very clean, very true, very on point. It's all, this is how I'm engaging my head center, as it were, which is just valuable. That secondary center, as it were, like the 9s engaging their heart, the 6s engaging action we're talking about.
Yeah.
At some point, not now. All right, so what are we at?
80. My next one's on 82.
Let's just jump there. We're gonna land this plane. All right. On one hand, she writes, finding pleasure in completing the simplest of tasks is a true reflection of the humble servant heart of the nine. On the other hand, processing with objective reason means that nines will always be able to come up with a justifiable excuse to delay doing whatever they keep putting off. What you see?
So I wrote that you can see the thinking processing here as it's applied to doing. So seeing multiple options is a thinking processing thing. And then not being able to pick up the most pressing one is a doing repression thing, right? So you see all of it, but you can't prioritize because you're doing repressed. And you don't know which one's the most important. You don't know which one you need to do right now. You don't know which one needs to happen today. That's doing repression. So I thought that was a really good example of those two things next to each other.
Yeah.
It's a little example, but
I think it's the case, and this happens with fives as well, that they're just looking for the ease. Is there an easy option that's going to fulfill my motive? If there were one, I'd probably grab it.
yeah.
Last thoughts on nines? That was helpful.
What do I want to say about nines? I think nines are really worth getting to know to bring up complexity because they are very complex underneath everything. They're simultaneously very simple and very complex. And I don't know, I don't have any other words to explain that, but I bet you would agree.
Do you?
They're easy to get along with and they're easy to predict, which makes them great partners. But they can hold multiple views of everything really well, which makes them really valuable if you need to see a different side of something or if you just value, like Jace and I talk about what we think all the time. That's what our conversations are, is what do we think about things. And because they're thinking processors, they can engage you in that, right? So they meet the world with this simplicity, but they can hold a lot of complexity. And I think they're lovely. I don't have anything else to say. I think they're great.
Hey, Kay, guess what?
What? You are.
Somebody told me that if you